Hey guys, I'm about to design a building to fill out my 3D organic modeling scene, but also to demonstrate some techniques for the first year building class. So I thought I would give you guys a little bit of insight into my concepting phase, just because I haven't created a solid concept just yet, but I do have some images here in pure ref that are going to act as my guide, along with just the aesthetic of my troll character that I've been designing. There's Mr. Troll here. So initially I wanted to do something sci-fi based, but since my troll ended up going full fantasy armor, I'm going to work within those constraints or within that genre. So PureRef here being a small little app just to hold reference images, right, which is going to give me an idea of shape language, maybe down the line some color. This one I was really interested in, and this specifically, along with the marker from Dead Space, maybe go for like an epic landscape. And I wanted it to be like a Raven's tower, right, like a communications tower. So a couple of ways I could go about this, right? I could jump into Unity and start to maybe sketch in 3D, or to put together some 3D shapes in order to kind of block out my ideas, but this time I decided I'm just going to go ahead and sketch in 2D first. Let's see if I can find a nice brush. And then, work on the 3D stuff once I'm happy with my concept. So I did like this this raven over here. So it's kind of got this sense of like a bird opening his cloak, right? Like the raven is over here. Maybe it's like a bird opening its wings here, right? To as if somebody was going to come and a baby was going to come and tuck itself under its feathers, right? So to capture that shape initially is going to be my goal, right? To figure out, okay, what's the kind of shape language that I want to use, right? And then I had the idea that this side area might be something of like a landing zone, right? Either just for ravens as they fly in, or this one looks more like a pterodactyl than a raven. Or I was thinking about in world or in fantasy type of options, and what I might have them be is like maybe the goblins have some like flying machines that that have wings, kind of like a steampunk type of Da Vinci flying machines. Have this kind of stretched paper look to them, right? And maybe like the little goblin guys like strap themselves in and become little bats flying around in these flying machines. Alright, so then this building would be like a landing zone, and this would be almost like a runway. But I still want to keep some of that shape language in here. And I thought, along with the kind of gothic aesthetic of a raven, another interesting style in Gothic architecture are these buttresses, right? That are where you have kind of a ledge extending off from a surface, and then you have these interesting designs below here to kind of prop the, or to hold the weight of that secondary surface, right? So if I'm going to be working on something that actually works architecturally as well, right, that has some architectural basis or language within it, then I'm going to start to pull some shape language from my reference over here, right, to try and combine them all into one sort of idea. So it might be just like a standard thatched kind of fantasy roof at the top, and then maybe it's like a little spire tower that's got windows going down on top of maybe an older building, right, that was there before. Maybe we can get 2 roof levels jutting out. Right, and this could be, you know, like the little Raven Master's hut or whatever, like he sits there on the side of this building here. And then he's got somewhere to live. And then he goes up I guess the spiral staircase tower to feed the ravens to get their stuff out. Now the scale here is off if I've made this window. So if, say, these are the window height, oops, yeah, then my guy is about this big in my scene, which means that he does not need a house quite this large. Maybe something around here should be enough for him. Scale down a little bit. And I think the Raven's Tower itself will be mostly cylindrical. And then the bottom might be more squared off. I do want this kind of cloak shape at the bottom though, so maybe I'll round it off here. Have a door at the bottom to, again, to reinforce the shape or the scale. I want to have a few different areas or clues for my viewer as to the scale of the object. Then the birds would be landing at the top here. Let's see what else might we need up here. No, maybe this landing isn't quite dramatic enough to pull off this idea of the wing. But if it extends too far, it's going to feel off balance, like it wouldn't actually be able to stand, right? It would become a leaning tower. And this bit at the end is really just to create some shape language. It doesn't really need to be that shape for any architectural or any structural reason. Maybe I can have like some negative shapes in here as well to imply that it's not it's more like a bridge, right? It's not just a solid piece. So I do like to zoom out every once in a while and check, or even just resize my object down, right? Like you see me doing this. The advantage to this being that now this is my new guide, right? And that next time I draw it, I can take it in a slightly different direction, right? I can decide, okay, I want to go back to being more stylized and be a bit looser with my line work, right? And see what kind of things would be interesting. Maybe it's got a bit of a jaggedness to the tower. it's been cobbled together rather than built all at once, right? So maybe it started out as just a single house down here. Alright, and now it's starting to get back some of that bird-like shape here. So I always want to swap between kind of being more loose and artistic and creative with my lines, right? And then dialing it back into realism again and seeing which one is working better for me. Oh, this one's actually looking almost like a duck from the side, or like a swan, or some sort of like an ibis, I guess. So maybe it needs to have kind of be on stilts or something at the bottom. That's going to be a bit too spindly. But I can also imply that without necessarily, um, making it straight up on stilts. For instance, what I could do is maybe have some like hanging ornaments down here, or like little hanging bells or something, maybe, to attract the ravens back to the roost. They have these little hanging ornaments all along the building to like a little wind chime kind of effect. Right, so I can imply that lengthiness without necessarily breaking the architecture. This one kind of hangs off the side. Let's get some struts in here. This will be like the first expansion. It's the original kind of a stonework building, probably, if it's going to be at the bottom floor, right? Like maybe it has like a slightly raised doorway so that it, in case it floods or something like that. Or just also to give it more of that chicken coop kind of feel. I should look up a chicken. Look at what a chicken coop looks like. And then I can think about what kinds of stuff would be good along this balcony, right? Maybe it's just a hand railing or something up here. Oops. What's going on here? So again, I want this shape in here, but I don't really have a purpose for it yet, or a reason why it would have been built this way. So I do need to come up with a reason for this part, aside just jutting out here. I mean, I don't want to necessarily add too many support lines because I want to keep that kind of strange proportion to it. Alright, so now if I'm thinking about this as more of a real-time strategy object, right, I might want to swap into like drawing in isometric, right? So I could switch over to figuring out the actual shapes that are going to go together for this, right? And again, it's not at this point, even from a concept like this, I could go into 3D to start to sketch it out a little bit deeper, but I'm gonna stick with 2D for until I figured out something, maybe like until I get to color. So if this is another on top of the house. And then maybe only one side has like an awning. And then this other side is where, what do you guys call this here? It's got a name when you have that little bit sticking out the front of your house. It's not very common in American architecture, so I'm not quite sure what to call it there. So here, this part would be extending upwards. Nice thing being for vertical areas, right? Vertical lines stay vertical. And then any horizontal lines will just stay at this particular angle that I'm working at, about 30 degrees. So maybe the top will also be a circular area. Let's see, does it jut out this way? Oops. It's kind of a jet here. Maybe this is like a small balcony over on this side. And then the top of the building or the top of the tower gets shifted over. So then this is the actual Raven's Hut part, the coop. Interesting, okay. And then this kind of extends out where it's to, let's see about where. Make it a little smaller. Yeah, I'm thinking a smaller, rounded top, I think. Something like this. Like a rickety old tower kind of roof. Doorway about here. Let's move over my key art. Not that I'm keeping it. Okay, so this part is going to have things hanging down. Again, I need to figure out what the purpose of this whole object is so that it can be hanging kind of like with an arch here. Oh, now it looks really big. Now it would actually need a piece of support at the bottom. So we don't want it to look quite so heavy. Maybe it'll be a bit skinnier. Oh, I keep hitting this button by mistake. So instead of being straight angles here, maybe the end of the bridge is a lot skinnier. Alright, so I want to pull some of these kind of raveny shapes, you know, feathers or tails or beak, right? All those kinds of shape language would reinforce kind of the idea behind this building, right? Or the function of this building, which is the Raven Croft, I think it's called, when you have a nesting area for the ravens. So even though I don't, you know, I don't just have like a bird's head sticking out the top of my building here, I still want to imply some bird-like qualities to different areas. Now, this here is a bit of wasted space. Could probably just do another. Could either repeat the kind of mushroom top there, or find something else to put over here. Let's see. Yeah, I'll come back to that, but it's feeling a bit empty in that area, maybe in a few other little areas. I feel like maybe here, it's definitely more of like a hanging than a rigid structure there. And then I needed my railing at the back. Again, that kind of helps set the scale for a little human. At the top here, so he would come out of a little doorway, just there. Let's see if I get rid of some of this. I kind of like the more broken up kind of roof that I had of the other version. And maybe extend this building at the bottom a little bit more. Not quite that high. Okay, that's good. So what I might do to break up the design a little bit is to have certain areas that are made of wood and then certain areas that are made of castle stone. Right, so maybe like the main support areas that are a bit older, made of more traditional stone style. You know, if this is going to be the hut kind of area at the bottom, I want this to be like a thatched roof. So maybe here as well, some thatching. and then at the top being a more modern style, which might be, like a tile roof. Just apply some detail there. Versus at the bottom is going to be more of like a round stone, like cottage style with it's been like cemented together stones. All right. So this area here is still a bit unclear of the shape, but I can work that out in 3D. I'm thinking for this might be like a banner, right? If it's kind of like just hanging there in the breeze, and we have some sort of like symbol of the army or whatever is in charge here on that banner, then I don't necessarily need to worry about like how it's going to support the weight and things like that. But I still get to keep that beak-ish kind of shape language, right? That's going to imply a bird-like function there. Maybe some skinny windows at the second level. It's got a bit dirty down here. Clean it up a little bit and find where the breakpoint actually is between, say, the stony sections and the other materials. And then I need to think about, again, the guy who actually lives here. He's gonna need like a chimney so that he can do his cooking, right? So maybe the chimneys. Maybe he's got like a little area at the back here. Let's see what the back looks like. Maybe it pops out a little bit at the back in like a kitchen. And then he's got some like chimneys coming out the back. He's gonna cook his raven eggs in the morning. Get the day started. So if that's kind of a newer addition, it might have a tiled section there, and then next to it is going to be this straw section. Alright, so this gives me a little more to go on for my 3D model for the next stage, right? As I start to go in and design, right? I know that I'm going to be starting with rectangle, smaller rectangle above it, right? Get a cylinder in here for kind of a parapet, I think it's called. More rectangular shapes going up. A bit of a jutting extrude here. And then another cylinder at the very top here. With a landing area. It's kind of the side profile, right? This area might be a bit short. So with enough different areas, right? I've got straw here. Oh, I keep hitting the button. Now I can think about, if I just want to make sure that that I have enough color variety or enough colors going on. Right, you need like a straw color, so I'll make a layer behind. Thatched roof color. This one is also kind of a straw thatched roof. Maybe like a bluish, purplish for the tiled roofs. Purple being a Raven-esque kind of color. I think I said this part was going to be tile. I say the kitchen area as well, maybe. Small splash up there. The banner, I'll wait for last. Let's see, for the stonework, like a mossy kind of gray. Color some of these areas in and see if it's going to need to be broken up at all, or if I can just have it go all the way straight up the center. This one's also made part of that. And I think this guy is also stone, actually. I haven't quite figured out this middle part. Then I'm going to need some orange for the wood. So wood section, definitely the landing area. I think this house is also going to be out of the wood addition. Oops, carried away there. He's got a wooden door. He's got a front top door that's wooden as well. And then something in the middle of these for cobblestones. That's a bit more saturated. For like a river stones, river rocks. A bit too close. Oh. Okay. So good to check these colors against maybe the Adobe color wheel. What I can do is either just plug in one of these colors manually, right? If I click on the color, I can copy it, the hex value. I find it's the easiest one to copy from. If I'm having three colors, right? Let's see what it pops out. So pretty close on that one. Let's see where this one is leading. If I can go in this hue for I didn't include that one. And again, to zoom out, see that it looks interesting, right? And that hopefully the function of it should also be clear. Oh, you know what I wanted was kind of like a cage jutting out somewhere, as if they have like a aviary. So maybe they land, he brings them inside, and then this is kind of like little bird paradise with like a few like levels of bird beds, chicken coops, that kind of thing. Inside here, so instead of having windows there, I would rather do something like like a little bubble thing with like cage. It's like jutting out. Cool. And then I have the banner, which, I mean, if they're the bad guys, they're probably in red. Right, let's just see what it looks like. Kind of like for the Horde. Okay, pretty good. Interior. So pretty happy with that. Raven's Tower, although now I'm looking at it, I don't even know if I need this whole bottom area. The kind of original house. So let's see if I kind of paint this out. Here, is that an improvement? It's certainly not adding enough there to warrant it, so let's see if we can come up with something different for the bottom. Go back to the original, more skirt-like design. Like a softer bottom. So it could be like just a sloping tower. Oh, kind of like this. And imply that it has like a staircase going up. From the gate. Yeah, I think that shape just gels it a little bit better with the wackiness on the top there. Now, minor issue being that if this is all the same color at the bottom, it might not look as interesting as having it broken up. So I might need to still add an awning or some other details here. obvious. And then over on this side, maybe you have a smaller, like a shed kind of awning for like stacks of firewood, let's say. Cool. I'm liking that better. Or if I could have anything hanging off the back, like on this side to balance it out a little bit better. Just another one of these. And then if I've gotten rid of the straw everywhere else, maybe I need to have a tiled roof here as well. Just want to make sure that this isn't competing for attention, right? Like right now the yellow is kind of competing with the purple rather than complementing it. So maybe the banner can be yellow. So this feels more cohesive than the other version. Okay, so yeah, from this point I'll be ready to move into 3D. So let me save it out and move into Maya. Alrighty, so in Maya, I'm going to find my front or my side view, do an import image plane, and bring in my concept. Scooch it out of the way. And it looks like the basis is really going to be a cylinder for this object, but I don't necessarily want to stick with the default cylinder, right? If I click on Inputs Polycylinder 1 here, I can decrease the complexity of that object. Typically when I'm working in this low poly style, this is assuming that we're going to have multiple buildings on screen in a mobile platform most likely, or a lot of buildings in a PC platform. 12 sides is plenty for a cylinder where it's not really enough to get you in trouble. 10 is going to be fine as well. 8 is pushing closer to a low poly style where you're actually going to see some of the angularity there, so you might not want to go as low as 8. Typically 10 or 12 is going to be good for a smooth surface. And I want to turn subdivision caps to 0. That way I can still select the top of the object in face mode to extrude it. Now, the other thing that is not pictured in my concept art is that when we are making real-time strategy buildings that are going to be, placed around the scene and might be on uneven terrain, we need to make sure that there is a little bit of geometry past where the surface is going to be. So even though, say, I'm working on this object and like the door is going to be right here. All right, let me just say this is my door, right? The door does not go at the bottom of your object, right? Like the ground is not the bottom. This little area at the bottom needs to be there so that when the object is placed in the scene, right, that it can slide into the landscape a little bit. So either just have your walls extend straight downwards slightly, or you can make it an aesthetic thing where maybe the style of your buildings will have oops, oh, um, will have like a rocky incline at the bottom, or like I've seen that a lot where maybe these will be like gray stones at the bottom, and then that's kind of the foundation of the building. So it can be used stylistically, right? But either way, what we don't want is for that edge to be right on the ground. So say if this is what our building looks like, right? When we optimize these buildings, we typically cut the bottom out because nobody's ever going to see it from this angle. But if you have it sitting like right on the dot, like right on that line, right, I can simulate that by holding X and snapping to grid, right? Even though it'll look fine, what sometimes happens is you sometimes get little lighting errors right at the collision point, which can cause like flickering on the texture, or like light to kind of flicker and bounce in funny ways down here. So typically we just solve that with a little bit of intersection, right? Go back a few steps. All right. So again, X to snap to grid. I'll keep a small area at the bottom here. Now, my initial shape, for the sake of the door, should probably just be as high as it needs to be for the door. And then I'm going to start creating the forms of this object. And I like to use the extrude method just because this is what Maya likes, in terms of the tools, the UV unwrap. Everything is going to work kind of more in harmony with the software if you use this method rather than, say, jamming objects together, right? Where you just have like, okay, well, this is the base, and then I have like my next little object, and like, say, the next part of the tower is a different size cube, right? This kind of modeling requires a lot more cleanup at the end. And once you get to the UV stages, typically you'll find a lot of issues, like say you start to unwrap and then you realize, oh, I've got all this internal geometry, and so now I have to fly around the middle of my object and like delete faces, and oh, I didn't delete the right face because I couldn't tell what I was doing. Like, rather avoid using this method, and I see this a lot in these Blender tutorial videos where they're just like shoving primitives into one another. It's going to create problems for game engines. It's going to create problems for your UV unwrap. Whereas if you use an extrusion method, right, it will understand the cylinder. It will come out in a understandable shape when you UV unwrap these kinds of objects. Even as I get to this square zone, right, say I'm going to extrude one more and then go into this next little tower section, which is going to be squared off, right? I would still rather come up with a solution other than just jamming a cube in there. So either going into my multi-cut, right, I could choose a few edges to cut here, and maybe just extrude the middle part, right, and see how this looks. these edges feel like they need to come in, right? Maybe there's a bit of unevenness. Or if that just didn't feel right, come back a few levels and just make that cut as well. Right, and this leaves me with quads and triangles, but no like internal geometry here that isn't going to be seen, right? So the one time that it will be useful to use a primitive kind of pushed in is going to be on this additional hut area, right? This is because I want to actually imply or show the viewer, right, that this was a later addition to the building rather than something that came with the initial plans, right? So here, if I'm eyeballing this, it's probably about yay high. It's a one-story hut. You know, maybe I said this bottom area was about one story. Subdivision cap 0. Let's get it to be about the same height there. Assuming that this is about 7 feet or so for ceiling height. And try to gauge, if this had an interior, that it would have somebody's room or something in there. It's looking interesting. Looks like it was centered in my original design, so let's see if that looks better. Yeah, that looks a little more professional. So I could use snap to grid to make it exact. And then it looks like here, right, this top end kind of hits right here as well. Once they start shimmering, I know that they are intersecting. Now, here I could just make this a bit narrower to get this effect. This other tower coming further up. Although, it does look like it goes the other way, like it actually expands a bit. So again, trying to match the sizes approximately. Some being about one story and then some being about a story and a half when there's going to be like a staircase area. Looks like this is still a bit chunky. I want areas to feel a little more spindly or frail. Right, squeeze them in a bit. So now that I've got some gripping geometry, right, this is almost like a grip here, I want to think about maybe joining this, or even like if I want to complete this object into having that thatched roof idea. Maybe I can just do that geometry right away. And see how that, if that's going to play nicely with the building that it's attached to. Maybe look for opportunities there to join these things together, right, or make it slightly uneven, especially since the parts of the design are a little bit, leaning over off kilter and things. It's good to keep using that. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Now this intersection isn't super clean, so here I'm going to think about how these bits are going to join. Maybe I want to start to preemptively move things around here, anticipating a Boolean merge. Right, of like what areas could potentially weld into the existing geometry. And oftentimes when I'm thinking about Booleans or working with Booleans, especially when I'm joining a smaller object into a larger object, right? I'll often start to kind of wall off or give some supporting geometry right in the areas where that intersection is going to occur, right? So I might bring up some additional geometry here. Oh, I wonder if I could work in symmetry mode. X object Z. Yep. Alright, so if this is going to be a connection here, I could use some of my existing geometry and plan for where this house is going to actually intersect with the rest of the geometry. So having those vertices there ready and waiting are going to give me better results when I actually join these two objects. And I could just join them, you know, without doing this step, but prior knowledge and experience has shown me that, you know, the Booleans is a bit of an unstable tool, and you can't always trust it. The other thing to keep in mind or to do is to save your work before you do any of those risky objects. Okay, so other ways to mitigate risk is to delete your history, freeze your transformations, Boolean union. Now I can see the new geometry that was created. And generally, I want to do some cleanup after this, right? So since we got a lot of n-gons and things, whoops, select all. It might be a good idea to do some target welding to get things lining up, but be mindful because like that move, not a great move because I've got a face on this side and then this face would have been 180 degrees. And cutting additional geometry for support if it feels like something is hanging by a thread. And then merging extra geometry that isn't really doing anything, or extra vertices in this case. So Control and Shift to slide this vertex along the edge. See how that came out. And then again, in these areas where I gave it a little bit more support geometry, right, to just finalize that and make sure that these polygons where the two pieces have been merged are quads and I'm not like throwing a lot of n-gons into my scene, right? Five-sided shapes like here. I have a funny sided shape, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'd probably want to support this geometry here with an additional ring, which will get rid of some of the strain on this object here and bring it back to being a quad, right? Not a huge deal, but when you get into UV unwrapping these kinds of objects, right? Let's see. Just do a quick automatic on this guy. Once you have a 5-sided object in UVs and you try to tweak it a little bit, right? It is much harder to correct for any skewing, right? So it's more likely that you're going to get some strange pixel stretching on your texture in areas like this where you have a 5-sided shape than in a 4-sided area where it'll be much more predictable in the UV editor how it's going to act and react. So whenever possible, right, try to spot your n-gons, your 5-sided shapes, and just look for an additional edge loop somewhere that you could put in, maybe where the geometry needs a little bit of extra support, or where you want to take the opportunity to do something stylistic, right? Where so I can take this ring now and exaggerate the slope slightly. I might want to do it here as well. This area here feels like a bit of a weak connection. Oh. Okay, there's this little house. So made some progress, increment and save, and delete the history, or vice versa. Right? Sometimes I do the increment and save first, and then I delete, just because it's a bit easier to remember to save than to delete history. Alright, so this little tricky bit here, let's see what my shape is. It goes out, and then these two come up about the same distance, although this edge just gotta come in. So checking myself against my reference, right? And then it looks like the top cylinder doesn't quite take up the full area here, so maybe I can get away with this. Say if I want to now have a cylinder instead of a square again, I could think about doing the same thing as down here, right, where I have to boolean the object. This little area looking a bit sketchy, most likely because of this sharp bend here. So depending on how many polys I'm using, right, I want to go to check that in my heads-up display, poly count. Right, so since I'm still really low number of faces, I can start to think about adding some more detail, but I must also be aware of like the distance, right, that the camera is going to be from the object and the angle that the player is ever going to see the object from. So even though in the renderer, right, like this area looks kind of sketchy, uh, I'm 99% sure that nobody is ever going to see it in game, right? In this mock game or pretend game that we're making. So let's check the proportions again. It's looking a bit more spindly in 3D than it did in 2D. But we can keep going on it. Now here, I actually wanted some additional geometry, so I just realized if I have an extra edge here, I may as well use it. Looks alright from the side. So that'll be the actual Raven's hut. Yeah, it's about the same height as this guy. Only 6 sides on this particular object though, so I feel like I need a bit more geometry since this will be closer to the camera, theoretically. If this HUD has got 10, right, I should probably increase the amount of cuts that I've got up here. Let's see where the edge would end. Probably do something with that. Flip it back over there. Again, just to keep as few n-gons as possible. I've still got an n-gon right here. I want to bring it all the way down there. Hopefully make things a little more stable. Then right here. And I would need at least 1 or 2 loops here. So let's have an edge right down the middle here. Just bring this all the way up. At the back, I suppose I have this edge from the very bottom. If it'll let me cut all the way to the top, yep. And I'm going to bevel these to get just a teeny bit more geometry into the mix. Cool. Okay. And let's see if the circularize tool might work around now. So there it goes. The thing is, I think I need both. No, it doesn't like that. Will work in edge mode? It will. Okay, looks pretty clean. Lastly, the hut roof. I suppose I could even just delete these cross beams with Control and backspace. Actually, I might bring these some overhang like the other ones. Grow selection with shift period, shrink with shift and comma. Just double checking my proportions. Okay, and now I've got a ring down here that'll work nicely for the bridge extension or the landing pad as it kind of comes all the way out. Alright, there's my initial shape. What I want to do is also check how it looks like smoothed out, so mesh display soften edge. Gives me a better idea of how the light's going to hit it inside the game engine, right? So when I see areas like this, it typically means that there's a very sharp corner there. Now these smooth edges, I believe the default value is 30 degrees for an angle change, right? So if the angle between two faces at that edge is less than 30 degrees, it's going to interpret it as a smooth surface. And if it is more than 30 degrees, as a hard bend, right? Where the light will not have a soft gradient, it'll have a hard edge. So when you see this, it might mean that you've got a really sharp bend in a place next to more curvature, right? Like this bend is very soft, and then this bend is a 90-degree bend. And with a little bit of bevel, right, you can manage that a little bit better because now it has like a 45-degree bend here. Or if I give it more segments to work with, right, then each bend now splits up that 90-degree difference, right? Like this is a 90-degree bend, but if I've got 3 cuts there, then each of these is only 30, so it becomes very smooth. If I got 2 cuts, that's 45 degrees each, which is also doing all right. Just gotta watch out for this n-gon that I'm creating over here and think about how I'm going to solve for that. Kind of which supporting edge is going to come in and lend some stability to that area. Now, I did say in my design that these were going to be tiles. So if I was going to bevel them, I would probably keep it at like some sort of fraction of a tile width. Okay. So I'm pretty happy with that for a main structure. I've got to think about some of these details, right? Whether I'm going to have any interior details or any surface details that I need to worry about. This part here I can see is still catching the light in some funny ways, right? I've got too many triangles and things going on down here. Too many 90-degree turns, right? Like 90-degree turn, 90-degree turn, 90-degree turn, and almost 90 here. So I should think about softening out some of these places. Could try some merges and things for that. But it's dangerous to have so much on a single vertex, right? Where you have one face facing out at a completely different, like almost 180-degree angle from another face. Okay. Because you also need to think about how this is going to affect your texturing, right? Like, what's really going to happen at the merge between this tile area and this stone area, right? Like in a real construction, there would be a break somewhere between where the tile intersects, or if it doesn't intersect, right? That like, first of all, this face here is probably the representation of how big a tile would be, or a tiled section. So it's not likely that it would have this narrowing effect here. I might want to think about how to get rid of this strange shape, right? By moving some verts around. To get it more at the same level so that it, when it comes to the texture, that it doesn't clash. Yeah, it's pretty good. This is also a good point that if you want to rough up your building a little bit, right? Say like you want to imply some sort of like collapsing uh, or further enhance the leaning kind of nature of it, right? That this is a good part to jump into the vertex kind of selection mode and just put some of these bits a little bit off kilter or off balance. just if you want it to be a little bit more stylized, or a little bit less perfect. Now from this angle, it looks like a duck with a hat on. I didn't see that before. He's holding a little house, maybe. So other things I need to think about for geometry stage is, are my doors and windows going to be cut out, right? Or am I going to have any interior pieces? So if I do have, say, a doorway, right, do I want to think about adding some geometry here and like giving it an indent on the actual geometry, so that it's very obvious that there's a lighting change there. Right, so door frames would be a good one. You could also think about the windows, but not really for the tiles, right? Same, I mean, even for the windows, it's kind of up to you whether you want to have them pushed in or not, but I wouldn't really have like an interior space to one of these buildings unless it was something like a bubble top, right? It had like a dome top, or like an open area that I needed to see inside. But for something enclosed like a hut sort of area, or even this cage area, I wouldn't go that far. Now for this cage, though, now that I'm thinking about it, bit of a sketchy angle there. What I can do to create window effects, right, is to have a second piece of geometry sitting on top of um, an opaque piece of geometry. So what I might have is like a transparent cage sort of window, or if you're making actual glass windows, this works as well. It's kind of why I wanted to demo it to you. But say I've got, say, this little area here that's going to have a window effect, right, where I'm going to actually have like a caged area. I don't necessarily need to have a lot of geometry behind here. What I can do is just have a small little area that's kind of nudged in, and just work within that. So let's see. So I don't necessarily have to have like an entire room in here and then a window on top, although this is one way that you could do it. Say that if you wanted to have an apartment or something, right, like in the Spider-Man game, they have this kind of effect where it looks like you're looking through a window into somebody's apartment, but it is a shader effect in that case, partially accomplished by shaders and height maps and things. All we really need is a small indentation and then the window on the outside. Now what I've done in kind of like house situations, building out like a suburban house or something like that, what you can do then is on these interior faces, all you need to do is paint some curtains, right? And the implication of maybe a room inside there, with forced perspective, right? But even just having like some curtains there and then a window on the outside over it covering the curtain area. Now this is going to cause issues in a window scenario because of the funny angles that I've got wrapping around this space here. And I forgot to use symmetry, so I'll need to go back. But for a window, all you really need is this one transparent panel on top of an area, and then some texturing underneath with a small gap in between. You don't necessarily need to model the whole interior to get a window effect. And then for most of the time, like say windows down here in my model, and for my front door, I'm not even going to include that in geometry, right? Like up here. I don't necessarily need to include geometry for a door. All I need to do is draw that on the texture and then use bump map and height map, etc. to sell the fact that there's an interior space or a door frame there, right? Like this level of pushback can be handled by a good height map or just a change in material. Cool, so other details I need to add. Let's see, I do need this banner. So think about that for a second. J to lock my rotation angles by 15 degrees. I want to make sure this particular part is visible from my real-time strategy kind of distance. Looks like I might have made this walkway a little bit of a different shape than my initial plan. But in this case, get rid of this guy. Make one without any, I guess just without any horizontal divisions. So a little bit of, let's say, proportion issues here. Not really issues yet, but just artistically to make sure that I'm implying some of those bird shapes. And making sure that I'm staying pretty faithful to my concept art shapes, right? Can also think about adding some imperfections on the other axis, right? do want to have this platform be flat at the top here. So I'm just going to flatten that height-wise. And now I've got these 4 awnings as well. Those, again, if they're only going to be seen from the top, can be single layer planes. But if I want them to be, say, made out of tile, right, and I've already set myself a width here for about how wide I want the tile geometry to be, probably better for me to just give it a little bit of bottom facing geometry as well as some two-sided geometry, just in case I'm in a situation where I need to show this building from a downward facing angle. Again, looking for repeating shapes, repeating angles and things. So if I've got one down and I feel like it's working, best to just duplicate it, maybe try to keep the same angle. This one kind of implies like it's split, so try to split these down the middle. And the bottom doesn't quite feel sturdy enough. Since these guys are kind of fighting me so much, I think I might just go back to extruding. Where I can have a little bit more control. Overall, pretty happy with how this is turning out. So next stage will be UV unwrapping, or finishing up some detail areas, right? Then UV unwrapping, texturing. So let me leave it there, but it should be a good guide on how to get a start, right? And how to make sure that you're bringing some of the personality of your concept art right into your final drawing. Oh, I forgot my kitchen idea. Maybe that got scrapped along the way. So um, let the art do the talking a little bit, right? Like, don't necessarily follow everything to a T. You do kind of discover in 3D a little bit, right? The things that are working or things that are fighting or clashing a little bit. Otherwise, keep an eye out for n-gons, right? N-gons are going to be trickier when you're getting to the UV unwrap stages, so rather try to create cuts strategically to strengthen the geometry in certain areas where you spot maybe some problems starting to happen, rather than leaving it all the way to the UV unwrap phase, because you are going to have to deal with it at some point. It's better to deal with it early on when you're solving problems anyway, than to get all the way to texturing and then feel like you've kind of conquered the mountain, and then having to like realizing that you have to go all the way back up the mountain to solve some of these geometry issues. So again, even with a quad, sometimes Maya will make the decision for you about where to put the triangulation, right? In this case, it's putting it from this edge to that edge. If I spot something like this that is not looking the way I expected it, I can always just go in here with multi-cut and cut that edge manually. In 3D Studio Max, you're able to actually just click on the face itself and switch that around, but I'm not sure where that option is here in Maya. So best of luck, guys. Hopefully this helps, and keep working on your building. Shouldn't take too long to model and texture. You know, the next the trickier steps that we haven't reviewed so far this semester will be getting it into Engine, right, and creating a nice environment around it.